and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Wednesday, January 15th. Another great day to talk about Notre Dame football in the national championship game against Ohio State. We've got a mailbag show for you today. It's kind of a special thing. We usually don't do this during game week. But since we're kind of doing a show every day this week, and there's a lot to talk about, a lot of excitement around Notre Dame football, we thought we'd open up the mailbag to questions from Irish Sports Daily subscribers about the game and anything else that they want to talk about regarding the football team. So we're going to do that. We've got a lot of scheme questions. We've got a lot of strategy questions, and it's going to be a very fun show. So we thank everyone for tuning in today. If you like it, of course, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is. We are going to go live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. Again, as we've been talking about, it's not just our shows that are on this channel. Matt Freeman posts a ton of video, a ton of reaction stuff, interviews, players, coaches. When he goes on the field, he's got the players leaving the field and some scenes from that. He's done really good work there. So it's not just our content in terms of podcasts with Power Hour, this show, Dimes with Dara. It's also the stuff that Matt's putting on the board, recruits, high school film, game cut-ups, all that good stuff. So lots of reasons to subscribe to the Irish Sports Daily YouTube channel. And as always, this show is brought to you by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang and ESQ Clothing. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD. You get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, how are you doing this fine afternoon?
I'm doing great, man. I'm engrossed in Ohio State stuff right now. So it's been fun. Obviously, when you're going against a team as good as they are, you're looking for like the minute details and things that have happened. But the greatest thing about it is that they played 15 games. So there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot to pick at. Obviously, they're different now than they were before, but it's interesting because it's one of those things where they are easily the most talented team Notre Dame has played, and they are number one in F+ and all that, and they're great, but they're not without their everyone has weaknesses you can attack, and it's about whether or not you can exploit those things and whether or not you don't get exploited for your weaknesses, right? So that's what football is all about, right? So it's fun. I love it.
Isaac K. Quinn Ewers going to the draft is interesting. I don't know how he can go to the draft when he's going to be Notre Dame's quarterback next year, Jamie. That's interesting. It's funny. It's
getting $400 million. Yeah,
I like how it's always funny. It's like, I'm not going to return here and lose my job as the starting quarterback. I'm going to go to the NFL. It's funny because he wasn't good. It's interesting to me. Like, I don't want to get too deep into this because we've got a lot to cover today. I still don't know why Sark didn't just make the move. You want Arch to be your quarterback next year. Just make him your quarterback this year. I don't get it. Especially when he had played a bunch too. It's not like it was nothing. So, but let's see. Let's because this I think this could be a quick question. Josh Miller, who's been the most important recruit Freeman has gotten to the team this year? I think the most important recruit that is on the team this year, I think maybe is what he means.
So like a freshman,
or maybe just on the team. I don't know. I want to say, so Sid Irish says Leonard Moore. I think like the most important recruit on the team, like the most important recruiting victory of like the last few years is Jeremiah Love. That how he ended up at Notre Dame and the fact that he did is kind of amazing, given just all that was surrounding that, and Texas A&M threw the bag at him, and he turned it down to come to Notre Dame. And this was before Notre Dame was like, okay, we're going to get involved in like the NIL in like a real way. So I would say that. Beyond that, a lot of people are saying Leonard Moore. I think that's good. Good call. What do you think?
I mean, I would say, yeah, Leonard Moore easily out of the, freshmen this year, just because where would they be without him if if Ben Morrison got hurt and they didn't have him? It's a completely different year. It's a completely different team, right? So, yeah, like I guess TXND, said Anthony Knapp. I mean, certainly, whatever. The thing is that there's been so many freshmen that have contributed that you can take one of those guys away and it would just be totally different without them, right? So,
like where would they be without Bryce Young, right? Like
Aeneas Williams.
Yeah.
They've really got major contributions from freshmen. And I mean, I think if you were going to say like who was the most important recruit in the, kind of Marcus Freeman era, I mean, I would say, even though he's not playing right now, Ben Morrison is the most important.
Because that was a recruit, like, because that was before he was the coach. Like he got him before he was the coach, but Ben Morrison is Marcus Freeman is the reason that Ben Morrison ended up at Notre Dame. He basically took them. He took him from Washington, basically.
And I would say too, like, as much as obviously you give credit to Al Golden and all the other players on the thing, he was the biggest catalyst for like, hey, now we can be this kind of defense because of Ben Morrison. And obviously they've recruited after him, and that's their say that, but he truly, like, for him to become like a difference-making man coverage corner, it changes their defense.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the questions. First one from Wisco Domer. Bit of a bundle of questions, but on the same topic. Does Ohio State spy quarterbacks? Who's the most dual threat they've faced? How has Riley fared against spies? Can't recall any from this year. He's been spied a few times. Ignore last part if no reason to think OSU will spy. I think they probably will, Jamie. I don't know how much they have spied, because they haven't really played a quarterback that they needed to put a spy on. But what is your kind of take on this topic?
Yeah. So yeah, obviously, like you said, there have been teams who've spied Leonard to varying degrees of success. I mean, not really. No one has really been successful. And the other thing is, no one just does it anymore, where they're like, every time he drops back, we're going to have a spy. Because if you do that, you become you're basically taking a guy out of coverage, out of the pass rush, all that. And if you're doing that every single time, you're too predictable, right? So they don't do it. But like, put it this way, Texas A&M was spying him, and they didn't do a good job of it, right? Like, and even if you think about like Georgia, obviously had guys that were supposed to like kind of chase him down. And there was probably some plays where like, oh yeah, they did get to him and force him to get rid of the ball. But there were other times where obviously he beat him too, right? So there's all that kind of stuff that, kind of goes into it, where I don't know how much they're going to spy based on that. And then also too, like, Jim Knowles is someone that wants to do so much in terms of what he does with, like, being unpredictable with pressures. So to say that, oh, hey, we're going to just be like Sonny Styles, you're going to be this guy. I don't know if that's how they're going to do it. Like, I would say, kind of how Al Golden did it with Riley Leonard, right? Where they did a lot of stuff where it was like, okay, well now Maris Leopold is going to spy him, but he's going to spy from depth. Yeah. And now this time he's going to run and make it look like they're running a stunt, but really he's just occupying, and he's going to be a spy here, right? Yeah. So there was that kind of stuff. I mean, we'll see if maybe, Ohio State does that kind of thing. That's certainly kind of on the table. They haven't played, we talked about in the last podcast, right? They haven't played real, threats there as a dual threat. No one close to Riley Leonard, that's for sure, and not even really anyone who I would say is like a guy that you would spy. You know, they haven't even had any of that this year or the last 2 years, really, right? So I think it's interesting because I was even going back to Knowles and when he was at Oklahoma State, and really you would think, I always thought like there would be like, oh, some kind of dual threat guy in the Big 12 that they would have to deal with, but there really wasn't. Caleb Williams was the last guy that he kind of had to when he was a freshman. Caleb Williams, by the way, huge game running that game, scrambling, had a 56-yard scramble, had about 80 something yards rushing in that game. So just something to think about.
Monitoring. We did find one. I was talking to Brendan McElhennon, who's often in this show. The bowl game last year, the Cotton Bowl against Missouri, which is, it's not totally apples to apples with Ohio State because they've got different players in different positions. Obviously, Caleb Downs is on the team this year, and he was not last year. But Brady Cook last year in the Cotton Bowl, 17 carries, 91 yards, 54 scramble yards in that game. Ran for, let me see here. Ran for, where is it at? First downs. Where are you at? 7 first downs. He ran for 7 first downs in the game. So that's something, right? It's not nothing. It doesn't. It's not like a prediction, or it's like, it's not a trend, right? They struggle against this, but Caleb Williams, Brady Cook,
something to monitor, like you said.
Something to keep in mind. Buddy Mitchell, longtime listener. Thanks for the great content and hard work. Keep hitting and hustling. Thank you for the super chat, buddy, and I appreciate you being here and your attendance. We appreciate everyone who has tuned in to our shows in the last couple of weeks here. Next question from Stonewall 20. How can Notre Dame better defend the offensive tempo when Ohio State replicates it? So Penn State at times went tempo. The assumption is Ohio State might try to do that. How can Notre Dame better adjust for that type of situation? Is it less that the fact that they're going tempo and some of the things they were doing off of tempo, sometimes the actual plays that they're running give them the success rather than the fact that they're doing it tempo? But do you see kind of a problem there for Notre Dame on defense?
I think one of the things that made it unique with Penn State was they were just so conscious of the play action stuff with Warren that it really kind of threw off what they were going to do in terms of like what they wanted to do with like linebackers kind of helping in that area to kind of not put like safeties on an island where they were just having to deal with that the whole time. And so I think that changed a bit of what they wanted to do in terms of maybe like, because there wasn't a lot of run blitzing in the game. And some of that might've been just because of the tempo.
Yeah.
And them like not getting a call in right away. But some of it I think was, they wanted to make sure that they were covered in coverage, right? Like that they didn't get into situations where, all of a sudden they're running, a screen, especially because they got burned early in screens and that kind of changed some stuff too. So,
yeah.
I would expect Ohio State's going to run some tempo and kind of test them there. But I think it is one of those things where when you go through that experience, you have that game, and that's been every time for Notre Dame under Al Golden is when they have one of those things where someone's like, hey, they go, and it's like the very first thing, like on the plane home, he probably was, he's celebrating in the locker room, whatever. On the plane home, he's probably only thinking about that and just like, well, what are we going to do with tempo? And they're having those conversations. And
I think part of it is like they got to be better against the run, just kind of period, because a lot of times when teams go tempo, they like something with their offensive line versus the front seven or whatever Notre Dame's out there, and they want to just keep going, right? Like teams don't really vary play calls when running tempo. because you can't really get a new play in, right? But if they like the play that they're in and they're going tempo and they're running at you and they're running at you and they're running at you, like that's where it's like the tempo is caused by the fact that you're struggling against the run, just whether they go tempo or not. And that's something like Tyler Borgman's asking, like, have you seen OSU go tempo much? Like any team, and Ohio State has this in their arsenal, so they can do this. If Ohio State is running the ball at Notre Dame with consistency, they will go tempo and they'll keep running it, or they'll throw bubble, or they'll throw, they'll run that counter action where they bring Jeremiah Smith across the line of scrimmage. Like then they'll start kind of doing like RPOs off of tempo when Notre Dame's tired and they can't get into like an exotic call. Like that's another thing. Like when you go tempo, you can determine what the call is going to be by the defense because they don't have time to put something in. So it's tempo. Plus it's like Notre Dame has to be ready for and be more prepared for the fact that like every team that has had success against them, like Georgia was able to do this, Penn State was able to do this, like they were able to manipulate the eyes of the linebackers and get people free in the secondary that way, right? Like Penn State, they missed a couple opportunities with Nick Singleton in this game on wheel routes and things like that. They were able to get Tyler Warren open on a similar type of play. So that's the thing Notre Dame's got a key on. Like every good team is doing that against them. And even though, I mean, even to some extent, like Navy tried to do this, right? Like just manipulating the eyes of the linebackers. Louisville was able to do this, right? Like it's been a problem all year. That's something they got to really hone in on.
It's been a problem all year. I would say it's just like that is the challenge of playing defense.
Right.
Like football. Every good offensive coordinator, if you're not running, if you're not shifting, if you're not doing a ton of stuff to stress the eyes of the linebackers and safeties, that's going to be a thing. And that's what they're trying to do. Obviously, it hasn't been a problem. Really, it hasn't been a problem at all overall because Notre Dame is easily the best, if not the best defense, or not easily the best, but one of the best, if not the best defense at not giving up plays where they have busts. It's very rarely a bust in Notre Dame's defense, and they are just extremely disciplined. They do a good job of like knowing their things. And obviously tempo is one of those things that can mess with that, right? So that's something there. Penn State wasn't a big tempo team, but they went to that during the time. And as you pointed out too, Greg, after the game, like some of that kind of hurt them too. Because it hurt Aller for sure. Like that was something where maybe it helped the running game, but when they had tried to throw with it, everything was sped up for him and he wasn't going about to do it. So just lastly on this, just like Ohio State, in terms of pace, they're one of the slowest paced teams. Like they run a play every 28.9 seconds. It's 118th in the country. And it's been slower than that in their last 3 games, which is, since they've kind of flipped some stuff on offense when they went, so it's every 31.2 seconds. So, they're doing stuff where they're running a ton of motions or running shifts or they're trying to get things. And that's there. But you have to also know that Chip Kelly, go back to Oregon. He isn't the same guy that he was at Oregon, but at Oregon, that's what they were. Sprint up to the line and, run up and go, tempo. So, based on what they saw against Penn State, I mean, I would be shocked if they didn't at least have one drive where they at least went for it.
Yeah. We got a question here from ND11988. It was in a different part of the thread, but I wanted to read it out. It's a question about 2026 recruiting. How's it going? Any improved response from top prospects? Also, there's a question about suspect Notre Dame will try to get ahead of NIL changes by spending a significant amount prior to the changes going into effect. And then kind of a third part of this is and related to the NIL. How your impression that Notre Dame might be disadvantaged by the upcoming NIL changes, or do you get the impression they are fully committed to finding ways to continue to spend at a top 10 level? So let's address the 2026 recruiting piece. They have a very big junior day coming up on campus shortly after the national title game. I think there's going to be a lot of top prospects at that. What is kind of your impression of how 2026 is kind of building at this point for the Notre Dame
I
football?
mean, I think it was up until this junior day, you kind of say like, okay, well, like let's kind of see where they're at once this kind of season kind of ends and whatever. And you obviously you knew that this was going to help in
Yeah. Oh,
recruiting,
for sure.
right?
Yeah.
You knew it was going to help, and but I think that based on kind of like who all came in the fall, it wasn't like wow, these are like unbelievable prospects that were coming in every week to these games, and fair enough, they didn't have a lot of big time home games to kind of bring people into.
Right.
But like you said, this junior day, it is the best collection of talent that they're bringing in for one of these in a long time.
Yeah.
In a long time. So you getting all those guys on campus, doesn't mean you're going to land them all, but it means, hey, you're getting in the game with them. And some of these guys you wouldn't have said they were in the game for before. So I think it's positive, good buzz and momentum going there with 2026.
Yeah, it's always the year after, right? Like it's never like when you're in it, it's never the class that's taking place while you're playing the season. It's always the one after. So I would expect 2026 to get some major headway with these guys on the NIL front. Like I don't think Notre Dame is doing anything different in terms of. I mean, they've signed a really good portal class. Like I think we like all of their portal additions so far. Guys are going to help the team, filling holes, things of that nature. Like especially at D line, especially at wide receiver. So that's a positive thing. With the changes to NIL, like Notre Dame is all in, and the other part is because of Marcus and what he has kind of given to the university in terms of like BK's whole thing was like he wanted things, and the university was kind of like, well, we also need to see a little bit more from you on the football field, right? Like you're asking for stuff, but there's not the payoff isn't coming, and with Marcus Freeman, he's made the university $20 million, right? Like the winning helps to say like, all right, you built the product. We're gonna invest in that product even more. Like they have the new facility that's going up, like the new version of the Goog. They are not going to be behind an NIL at this point. Everything that to the extent that they are different than other teams is going to be a choice by Notre Dame, not like when I say a choice, like they make their own choices on the type of player that they want to offer the bag to, like the real bag, right? If a guy's just like, I just like, if you're coming back to Notre Dame, just up in offers, they're gonna say, okay, we're all set, not to overpay for you. We're gonna move on with our day. They did this with players in the last recruiting class, right? So, but that's a choice on their part. It's not for the lack of resources. I don't think Notre Dame is ever going to be in a position where they don't have the resources to compete on an NIL level again. That's where I'm at. I'm curious to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, no one should worry about how competitive they're going to be in the NIL space. Like you said, they're not going to go out there and be like, they're not going to get guys who are just constantly looking for the next payday, because they also don't want to get guys who are like, hey, I'm only going to be here for a year. And then it's like, yeah, it didn't go my way, so I'm out and I'm looking for the next big payday or something like that. Or I did great and hey, I'm going to like hold you hostage for this kind of thing, right? So they don't want that. I mean, obviously they're going to guys are going to do well
for sure.
Notre Dame, but
yeah,
they're not going to get into a ton of bidding wars, right? It's not that they won't. I mean, they will get into some bidding wars, but they're not going to get into every bidding war possible for guys that just are not guys who are going to fit in with the culture of the team and the school, right? So, so I think that's, keep in mind, it's definitely not going to be a disadvantage. I mean, I imagine they will spend whatever before the things because it's uncapped, but I also imagine that like when it gets capped, that's not going to be a disadvantage to anyone really, other than like the big schools in general, because they would have spent more than the schools that aren't getting it, right? So then it's going to be about, like, you know, how smart you are and what you invested in, right? And I have a feeling it's funny, because that's one of those things where it's like, you know, they want to get it, schools want to get it because they want to get control of it, but it's one of those things where, like, I could totally see an Auburn just like things just getting way out of hand, because it's like they have so many guys that are just going to be like, give me this, or hey, and that, and there's just going to be, it's going to be not good for their culture, which is why, like, even though you can say, oh, Ohio State, like, their $20 million roster that everybody knows, well, yeah, they went out and got Caleb Downs and
Judkins,
right? And I'm sure those guys are making a pretty penny, but most of the things was getting those guys to stay in school. Yeah. So it's different, right? Like, so
like Travion Henderson and JT Tuilamau and Jack Sawyer,
yeah,
things like that.
And like what Penn State is doing right now, right?
Yeah.
Like same kind of thing. Yeah.
I was thinking, man, that these are the guys that Notre Dame is going up against in this game are like very similar positions to like Blake Fisher. And you can't hate on Blake Fisher. He went to the NFL. He's starting in a playoff game. Like, he is successful in what he's doing. But it'd be good if he was like Notre Dame's left tackle in this game. You know, like it'd be a pretty big difference. But, you know, I mean, look, everyone makes their decisions, and it is what it is. Thank you for the super chat, Kirk D.A. Anderson Fitness. What do you think of Kelly saying, I wasn't leaving Notre Dame because I couldn't win a championship? You can win championships at Notre Dame, but I chose another path because I wanted a different challenge. Shake my head. This was going to come up in another question, so we can kind of answer it here. From Oscar asked kind of a two-parter, and this is one of the parts. I don't really – I mean, it makes sense that he would be rooting for Notre Dame. He coached at Notre Dame. He is trying to revision his history with what it was. He pretty clearly felt like he couldn't win a national title at Notre Dame. Or else he wouldn't have left, in my opinion. And I'm sure he did want a different challenge. I think he wanted an easier challenge, is what it was. So, you know, it doesn't make me upset in any kind of way. Obviously, it's gonna get some social media stuff, but yeah, he didn't think he could win at Notre Dame, so he left. It's pretty much where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and he is trying to say like his words were taken out of context, which no, I mean, it was pretty cut and dry.
He gave a lot of interviews.
Yeah, he gave a lot of interviews about it, just like he was giving the interviews while he was at Notre Dame, talking about, you know, this is what we need to win, and this is, you know, if we get this, then we're gonna do, like,
in 2011. He said, I need my own guys post Cotton Bowl. You would never, in 2018 post Cotton Bowl, he said, I need better wide receivers.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
I know people want to talk about this because, like, you know, it is a topic. You know, people care, and like people like dunking on BK, which, hey, great. You know, like,
yeah,
good, because he said what he said, and it's pretty obvious. But I think it's just become obvious that whatever he says now, you just know that it's full of half truths and whatever, in terms of whatever's going to fit, you know, what he is. I bet he is, like you said, I bet he is rooting for Notre Dame because, like, there are guys he liked, but it's pretty obvious that even the guys who played for him, who are still on the team, aren't like, no one's going to be like, hey, Brian Kelly, man, thanks for everything you did for me. It's not like they didn't have that relationship. So it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. And then really quickly, Jay Lamont, thank you for the super chat. It's $14 million per bowl win. No, it's $20 million total. I want to say it was 4, 6, and 6, or 4, 8, and 8. So it's $20 million total that Notre Dame has gotten from making the college football playoff, or for making the national title game. All right, back to the questions. Let's see. We already answered that one. Next one, from Envy Irish. We saw some two-back sets last year against Ohio State work well. Any chance we see that again, or was that a Parker thing? Notre Dame's run some two-back stuff. Also, keep in mind, like, Riley Leonard, you're kind of always in two-backs when Riley Leonard's in the game.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, like, it's tongue-in-cheek, but it's actually it's also true from a schematic standpoint. So
yeah. So they ran two back power last year,
yeah.
which was a good play for them. And so, I mean, I could see them doing that this year, but like you said, basically whenever they run quarterback power, it is two back power.
Mm-hmm.
So if they want to, they can spread them out and then run quarterback power, right?
You can run the
And
same play with the same amount of blockers.
yes. So that's the same kind of thing where I do think I don't think there's a lot of if you run a lot of things where they're trying to go, horizontal, like where they're trying to get perimeter stuff, I don't think that's a good idea against Ohio State's defense. I think it is better to run at them, even though with those two defensive tackles are studs. But like, I do think it is more of a thing to. You're probably going to find some better success running at them than you will with more of the perimeter stuff, unless it's like the perimeter stuff, like kind of what they did against Georgia, where it's like non-running back kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, just ask Texas about running wide against Ohio State. It's not good.
Yeah,
but it also is like that's a toss, right? So like you're not manipulating anyone's eyes. Like the jet stuff that we saw with Faison, like there is Leonard can keep it and run. So you can't completely pursue wide in that situation because Leonard can just pull it and run up the middle, So that's why that type of play is a little bit more effective. You can isolate players on the outside rather than having everyone pursue like that. So, question from T. Sullivan, 08. What do you make of the improvement of OSU O-line play in the playoffs? Is it all the switch to gap versus zone blocking? Is it a personnel improvement, just experience and chemistry? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if this is a matchup that Notre Dame could or even should win. I feel like this was their weakness after the regular season. I think this matchup in particular will determine the outcome of the game. Good question.
I mean, it is going to be something that's huge for the game. One, I think Donovan Jackson is, because he's played way more snaps now at left tackle. He hadn't played tackle since high school. He kind of got thrown into the fire like, hey, good luck. Your first game is against Abdul Carter. So he, not a shock. He got whooped in that game. And he got whooped in some other games too, right? Yeah, I mean, he didn't have a great game against Michigan either. He's been much better, in pass pro in the last, 3 games. And they face some pretty darn good edge rushers. So it's not just like, obviously, the competition there. So I think that is part of it, because there was a real big drop off from Josh Simmons, who was the one who was their starting left tackle, was like going to be a projected first round pick, who took a big leap this year and was really great in pass pro. And then when they lost him, obviously Jackson had to move out. They've had to shuffle some stuff along the O-line. But yeah, I would say that the gap versus zone blocking, they are way more of a gap team now. They run a lot more counter tray, that kind of stuff. They don't have to work together as much as just like, especially, I think it just fits like a guy like Josh Fryer, who was the right tackle before. Well, he's not great. Like when he's got to reach an edge, I just don't think that's his strong suit. But if he's a big 6'7", 320, whatever guy who's blocking down, he can move people. So that's a lot better for them. So I think it fits them. It also fits Henderson is a better runner. He's a better runner on gap schemes than he is zone schemes. And I think so that's kind of unlocked him, which I think with Judkins, actually, he's better zone runner. So it's kind of made him not as good, I would say. But yeah, that has made a difference for them. Still, the offensive line is not great. Like they are not great. And in particular, but the problem is that where they really struggle is in pass pro. But if you aren't in too many situations where you have to, how Will Howard has to drop back and do standard dropbacks because you have to pass to win the game, they're going to be fine. They don't have to deal with it. They don't have to deal with it as much. But when they have to do it against Texas, obviously Texas got,
they've got dudes.
They've got dudes, right? So that was a problem for them. So that part of it is like a thing, because if you look at like early down stuff, we're just like defined stuff where they can just Howard can get the ball out quickly. He looks great. The line doesn't have to block for very long. They can do stuff, play action. They can do a ton of stuff there too. And so, but also too, like if you want them to throw, they don't throw deep very often, even though you think, well, Jeremiah Smith and they're not a ton. It's like 10% of the time, right? It's little compared to.
I think they have 3 more 20+ yard passes with Howard than Notre Dame does.
Yeah, so Leonard. They're not like a deep. They just obviously have completed more and they have better dudes there, but they're not a team that like wants to drop back and do that all the time. Maybe they would do it a little bit more if they get more man, in this game. I could see them doing that, but I think which is really one of the keys to the game is you do good, you stop the run early on early downs when they're versus their gap blocking stuff, and then you get them into a situation where, hey, pass pro, Notre Dame's running a ton of stunts, they're running different blitzes, whatever, on third down, and it's obvious passing situations. That's when you can win, because that's when Howard will throw the ball to you. That's when they get into situations where those guys have to protect and they're not great at it. And it's just one of those things where anytime Notre Dame has that situation, it's advantage them. That's why they're so good, right? It's just like any kind of obvious passing situation. I mean, I don't know what the success rate is for the offense against Notre Dame in those situations. It's not very high.
I mean, you'd be playing the game on the terms that Notre Dame wants to versus the terms Ohio State wants to. And, that doesn't guarantee an outcome or anything. But, like, you do want to force them to play in a way that they don't want to, or they would prefer not to, right? And it isn't to say they can't. But, like, that's coaching, right? Like, just put them in the least advantageous position while you put yourself in the most advantageous position. So, like, the question is, is it a matchup out front that Notre Dame could or should win? They need to win. Whether they could or should is kind of doesn't matter. They need to. They need to win up front in this game. Make it happen. Find a way to make it happen. If this is another game where Ohio State controls the line like Penn State was able to for a lot of that first half, it's probably not going to be 10-0.
Well, the reason Notre Dame, despite like some differences in talent with skill and all that too, the reason that the game, and they probably should have won the game against them last year, was they were better on both sides of the line.
Yeah, they just had the one explosive to Travion Henderson, which he can do, and that's always lurking, right? But it's still they won the matchup and they gave themselves a chance to win the game. Envy Iris says, Riley Leonard had some balls batted downs on screen this year. You all remember what happened final drive last year. Anything Denbrock can do to make that a more effective part of the game plan?
I don't even know, because I think that's just kind of like, I think it's pretty obvious. It's happened so many times that it's just like some guys don't feel comfortable kind of like layering it over there. And I mean, I haven't seen Leonard really do it well at all when he's had to do it. So I wouldn't say that there's something specifically Denbrock can do about it. I will say that both Sawyer and Uyeyama, if they're running like kind of screens to the backs there, both those guys have like tremendous hand-eye coordination and are there. So it is something where maybe you don't want to do it very much, to be honest. And it is one of those things where if you look at like that play, the play that was called, on that final drive, if that had gotten over his head, it was going to hit big, right? But it also, too, I think that was one of those things that helped shape Freeman saying, like, if we run it here and they have less time, because that would have taken X amount of time off the clock, Ohio State probably would have lost the game if they ran the ball there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like one of those things where you got to be kind of smart about it. So, I mean, I don't think you're going to see too many of those plays where they're running those types of screens to the backs in this game.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Next question from Envy Irish again. If Styles does spy rather Leonard, like you guys mentioned on Hit and Hustle, does that open up the middle more for Evans, or is there someone else that can man him up? I feel like he could have a huge game. If he's spying, it's probably, you don't really spy on standard downs. It's more of like a passing situation. So they would have a plan. Styles is a good cover guy. I mean, he was a safety last year, so he has an athletic ability to match up with someone like Evans. So if he is spying, that takes him away from Evans. You got to devote another resource to dealing with Mitchell Evans. Mitchell Evans has good memories against Ohio State. He had a really good game against Ohio State last year, breakout game for him. So that's a factor. But what do you make of this question, Jamie?
One, I mean, I would expect the tight ends, period, to have a big game. Like, I think that is obviously last year, Evans had a big game against Ohio State. I think you're going to see some of the same stuff too, where, where they've used Eli Raridan and like had him red zone, where they've attacked with him, scored the touchdowns against USC, got in a matchup with Kobe King in the Penn State game, drew a flag that led to Jeremiah Love's touchdown. Also, running backs in the passing game, it's huge. And I think this is something that when you look at it too, you're not going to want to have too many things where Notre Dame's receivers, although I don't like their Ohio State's corners that much, and that is going to be something that I think you can actually attack in this game. Just because of what you're going to get with like the pass rush and all that, you're going to have to. I think they have the best pass rush overall out of any of the teams Notre Dame has played, and they're first in sack rate. You have to get the ball out quickly a lot of the time. So tight ends, backs, that's going to be huge. Like Texas, that was a big part of their game plan, a huge part of their game plan. Here, I'm going to grab the numbers real quick for you. But so Texas, Quinn Ewers, 14 to 17 to running back and tight end targets for 148 yards. And 2 of their touchdowns, obviously.
Yeah.
Scored with Blue, on the wheel route, got
Styles
on the wheel route, right? So, and that's the other thing with Styles is he is a freakish athlete, but because he doesn't, and we talked about him as like that comparison with Isaiah Simmons, similar to Simmons, and why Simmons isn't working in the NFL is because at that time, Simmons, during that little mini era of college football, you could play with that big nickel and that big whatever. But now it's just morphed into way more of a passing game where you can't really play with that guy there because that guy's going to go against small little slots all the time and it's going to be a mismatch. And so he's right now in the process of learning as an inside linebacker, and he'll make like incredible splash plays, and he's got just a total knack as a pass rusher, and he will run stuff down. If you run away from him, he can run it down like a friggin' cheetah. Like he is so fast and he's a freak athlete, but he's slow to recognize stuff in the run game. He's also a little bit slower to recognize stuff in the passing game if he hasn't seen it before. So that's why you can get him on some of that stuff too, right? So that's something to watch. Like they went at him, and Oregon went at him too, and had some success. So it's something to think about.
He didn't have I don't feel like he has the fluidity, and that's why they moved him to linebacker. I didn't feel like he was as fluid in the secondary as someone like Kyle Hamilton.
He's different than Kyle Hamilton. We're similar and he's also, I mean, obviously he's bigger. He's like 240 pounds, right? But like he's just. I actually kind of think maybe his best position might be like stand-up edge rusher, but but I don't know,
like Abdul Carter.
Yeah, I kind of think that might end up being ultimately his future later on. But
T. Sullivan 08. How much man versus zone coverage did Notre Dame use in last year's matchup? I keep seeing that Notre Dame cannot match up with OSU in man-to-man coverage. at least not as much as they typically do. My question is, what did they do a year ago? Because that seemed to work pretty well. Some of the personnel has changed. It's probably fair to say both units are comparable to the 23 versions. They used a ton of man last year, but I mean, look, they mixed coverages a lot. What they did with their safeties, they funneled players to certain areas of the field. I think you could do more, frankly. Like Notre Dame got burned in some busts, particularly with DJ Brown last year. But like they mixed coverages a lot. Plus Ben Morrison had an incredible game against Marvin Harrison Jr. They need that from Leonard Moore. They need it from Christian Gray. Not maybe specifically that type of performance, but they need to be able to hold these guys in check. I think Jordan Clark against Emeka Egbuka is like a huge matchup. Egbuka's killed Notre Dame. Not always out of the slot, but he killed Notre Dame. He has 16 for over like 180, a couple touchdowns, or at least one touchdown. So what do you think about this?
I think, Notre Dame's still going to run some man, but you can't. Part of it is like what we kind of talked about with after the Penn State game, how they took advantage with some run game stuff versus man too. So they want to mix it up there because you don't want to lose things in what they're doing in terms of like, hey, we're trying to run guys off so we create openings to scheme stuff in the run game, right? So there's that kind of thing too. So I think they're going to just do more zone period because of that thing too. And then just the other thing is, yes, they have been better in man. Jeremiah Smith has cooked a lot of people in man, right? Like he's a freak, right? There's a reason why people are like, if he was in the draft this year, he'd be number one. Like,
yeah.
When is the last freshman who was like that?
Peterson.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson.
He was a monster.
Yeah. So interesting. So Howard, when he targets Jeremiah Smith and Egbuka versus man, 0 picks, 5 INTs when he targeted those guys versus zone. When also too, like when I know obviously Notre Dame's a big blitz team, and I mean they're still going to blitz. That's who they are, and they're good at it. But I think you're going to look at certain things too, where maybe they don't do as much of it, or they do a little bit more where they send 4, but they're going to drop like Tuya Almaka and do some different things there just to kind of confuse things, because versus blitz, he's thrown 1 pick. He's thrown 9 when teams don't blitz. So that's just one of those things when if you're looking at like little things that can win you the game or whatever, like that is something that, is there. And then I think too, you got to remember that Jeremiah Smith is, for as talented as he is, he's a freshman. So his understanding of like when he gets a certain coverage about like, I got to sit here versus this, or I got to do this against this kind of thing. Oh, this is how my leverage changes when I'm getting this versus zone. It's not what it will be 2 years from now.
Yeah.
So when he gets man, he's like, I got man cooking this dude. That's like one-on-ones at a camp that he's done for a million times. But when you're doing it and you're not getting that, he's maybe not going to be at the right depth that he should have. Maybe he should have took an outside release on this versus whatever. And I think that was a problem for him versus Texas. Mm-hmm. So that is something, if obviously he got targeted 3 times, he got 1 catch, right? Like he was a non-factor versus Texas. That was a huge reason why they held them to 21 points, just their offense, 21 points. Yeah. Obviously, they got 11 on defense. But, like, that is all kind of stuff to think about there, right? So do some of the stuff that who you are and what makes you successful. Yes, be that. But you have to mix in more. You're going to see more zone from Notre Dame this game because Ohio State's just not as good going against it.
And you don't want them to be able to predict what you're running. That's another part. Like, you don't want Chip Kelly to be like, I know I'm getting man here. You know, you got to mix up.
Or Will Howard, he thinks this is whatever. You have to try to do everything you can to get him confused and whatever, because I think he is someone, he is decisive. That's one of the things that, and it can be good. And that's
why he's so good against the blitz.
Yeah, that's why he's good versus blitz. That's why he's good versus man. But like, that's also why you're like, you know, some of those times when he's thrown it in under 2.5 seconds, which is like considered like, you know, basically quick game or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Well, he's thrown 5 picks that way. And you're like, he's threw 5 picks like that. And you look at like Riley Leonard, who is like 87% completions basically when they do quick game. He's been very, very good, very accurate. Howard is not as accurate. He's completion percentage high, but sometimes he just throws it without thinking because he's not the best at reading it. He can be confused.
Yeah. Speaking of coverage, Leonard Moore was the Football Writers Association National Freshman of the Year on defense. So good recruit.
I mean, well deserved.
Yep. Irish Bronx, Love and Cross seemed to leave the PSU game in better shape than they left the Georgia game. How much improvement do you think is reasonable to expect from them, considering the type of injuries they have? This question is directed towards Mrs. Uyeyama.
Yeah. You know what? I always talk to my wife about these injuries and kind of what it could mean. And basically it's just the kind of thing that honestly, she just said, like, without kind of like treating those people every day and kind of knowing where they're at after, you just really have no idea to say like, hey, they're going to be way better for this. It's like, you just don't know. And also too, if it's like not all the way there, it's very easily just one small thing can happen and it can get tweaked again, which was, you know, what happened with Love in the Georgia game. Right. And it happened to Cross in the Georgia game too. Right. So we'll just see, but we did say that like having that extra, they have an extra day off than Ohio State, and having more, like, you know, what was it, 9 days or 10 days or whatever it was.
It's the game is on the 11th day. The game is on the 11th day.
So having those days, it does make a difference. It does absolutely make a difference. But you just don't know how much of a difference. And I will say too, is that like when you see some of the stuff with, you know, Ohio State hasn't lost as many. They've lost a 2 linemen for the year, which is obviously big, but they haven't lost as many guys for the season as Notre Dame has.
Yeah. But
that O-line that, you know, everyone's like, well, they're going to be whatever. They're banged up.
Yeah.
They're banged up. There's like guys like Donovan Jackson's playing. He's got some kind of leg thing. Fryer's got some kind of upper body thing. The one guard who was the starting kind of left guard who stepped in, he's got, I don't know, he's dealing with something. He's like trying to play through it. So there's all of that's going on that's up front, where like 3 guys are like, I mean, it's the same thing for Notre Dame. Guys got whatever,
for sure.
But anyone who thinks it's like, oh, they're so much healthier, the guys who are playing, not really. You know what I mean? They have stuff, and obviously they got some injuries on defense that are going to be like, could be pretty huge if they, you know, guys can't play at, you know, full or close to it.
Yeah, JT Tulamau, he got banged up in that game. He looked okay. I mean, he's going to play. He looked fine.
He's going to play. Denzel
stuff
Burke,
like that. Yeah. Stuff like that. It just could crop up later on in the game. You just don't know. Chris ND 92. What's Notre Dame's best strategy on offense to attack a super OSU defensive line with a mismatch, walking wounded offensive line?
I mean, I think it is to get those positive plays so they don't get into, you know, those 3rd and long kind of situations. It's the same kind of thing, right? Where Notre Dame has been awesome on 3rd down, like just light years better on 3rd down than they have been they were in the regular season. They're 50% on third down in their 3 playoff games. And obviously against Indiana and OSU, they were like, over 60% in both those games, right? So, and those teams have pretty darn good pass rushes, but one of the keys was they didn't get into too many of those like third and forever type of plays, right? So where even if they got havoc on first down for, whether it was Indiana or Penn State, which both of them did a decent amount, where it was like 2nd and 14, they got in a situation where all of a sudden, well, now it's 3rd and 4 because they got 10 or whatever. So they got into situations where they can win. So I think that is going to be the key, because if you let it be something where it's like, hey, they can just come on after you, or you're trying to get a screen just because you got to get the ball out so quickly because the pass rush, and then first of all, it's not just the defensive line, because they are tremendous blitz packages, and Simon is a phenomenal blitzer, and like Styles is a good blitzer. Their DBs, there's so much speed there that they bring when they bring the blitz that it can be overwhelming. If you're in 3rd and 8, it's tough. It's really tough, right? So you want to get into those situations where, hey, we're in a spot where we're getting into, you have a chance to convert there and get, the yards. But if you get into long yard situations, you're just going to be hooped. So positive. The least amount of havoc against, the more positive stuff you can get on early downs, the better.
I think they'll roll pocket a good amount. They'll move Riley Leonard around, probably half roll stuff. And to negate it, like people are talking about taking shots and stuff. I think the shots that Notre Dame takes, I think they're going to try some fade stuff, some back shoulder stuff against them, because it can happen quickly, right? You don't need a ton of time for that. And then when they do take a shot, you got to hit it. I mean, that was part of the problem for Penn State. Like Cole Nicky drew up some shots to running backs. Aller missed them. You dial up a banger, you got to hit it. And that was what Notre Dame was able to do, right? Like Notre Dame was able to do that against Penn State, right? They took advantage of their opportunities and Penn State didn't. This is just building off of everything you just said. Like that is all true. But you got to be able to move them around a little bit, right? Because if they're going to send pressure, you can just kind of roll away from the pressure, and then it takes a long time for them to kind of get to him. You can open something up, and you might have to. I mean, another part of it's like you might have to be okay with punting, right? Which is Notre Dame's been okay with punting a bunch of times in this playoffs, right? You play really good defenses. You're not just going to run through them. So yeah, that's kind of how we come out on that. Next question from Loyal Stepson. Should Ryan Day ditch the Just for Men Ronald Reagan black hair color for his beard and just accept aging with some grace? Who is he fooling?
This is the question of the whole thing. Thank you.
I feel like salt and pepper. Go with it, man.
Man.
Since when is that a bad thing? I think I agree with Loyal Stepson. Like you gotta just man.
You're not fooling anyone is right. We know you're stressed out on the job. Show that gray.
Show the gray, man. It's all good. People like that. Look at Brian Newberry for Navy. Looks fantastic. He's got the gray. Just go with it. I agree with Loyal Stepson. A serious question from Loyal Stepson. What is the best use of KVA's talents on passing downs, rushing from the end, or blitzing as a linebacker?
On passing downs, it is rushing from the end. And I think part of that is because of them not having Botello and Boubacar.
Yeah.
Because if they did, then he would be used far less. I'll say that for Jalen Sneed, though, and I'm just going to kind of flip it into that, because Jalen Sneed he can do stuff off the edge and they can run games with him. But when they're doing stuff where he gets matched up with guards, he has been winning so often.
Very effective, yeah.
With that, just because he's so friggin' quick, and then he's just, and he basically what it does when he's going against those guards is he will have, and sometimes obviously when you're running a blitz, you got to fit your blitz. You can't go in the wrong gap. You could blow up the whole play by going in the wrong gap. But if they give him situations where he has a two-way go, he's winning, right? So that's the thing. It's like, I think KVA rushing off the edge in this game, I just, early call is he's going to get a big sack in this game rushing off the edge at some point.
I mean, the Notre Dame Ohio State recruiting battle there was big, right?
Yeah.
Like it looked like he was going to go to Ohio State. He's at Notre Dame. He's a guy who has benefited now. It will benefit from the 11 days off as that knee gets stronger and stronger and more stable, and he becomes as explosive as he could be. I think he's someone that needed time. He apparently hasn't had a setback in his recovery, and he hasn't had to leave a game like we saw with Jeremiah Love and obviously Rocco Spindler with that. It's a different type of injury, but so he's a guy where it's like, it's a good point by you. Like he could show out in this game in a way that he hasn't recently just because of improved health on his part. Next question from JP Doc 31. Who will be on the Notre Dame starting offensive line for 26-27? It's never too soon, Jamie. It's never too soon to talk about starting O-line.
I'm going to guess some junior in high school right now will be the left tackle. No, this is obviously he's just doing. You know what? I appreciate these questions because JP Doc knows how ridiculous it is.
Yeah,
to be predicting and I understand people want to talk about like what the offensive line is going to be right as soon as the season ends. They're going to be like, "Hey, what's the offensive line going to be for next year?" Ask me at the end of spring, because there's so much that can happen then, and we just got to kind of, especially for the line. I think there's so much development that goes on in between the end of the season to the beginning of the season that can really kind of shape where guys fit. So it's, I'll just say that based on kind of how they are, and obviously with Joe Rudolph too, like I can give you this prediction that 2026, 2027, if Joe Rudolph's still around, they're probably gonna have a really good offensive line again. It's going to be good.
They're going to be really good next year. And I'll say like the spring fall camp battles to start on the offensive line is going to be intense. It's going to be crazy. Like because you have all these starts coming back. You have all this talent sitting there. Emil Wagner, I think he's probably Emil Wagner and Billy Strouth are the two where it's like, you're definitely in. You're definitely going to start. But like left tackle with Knapp, Jagusaw, Spindler, Coogan, Craig, right? Like it's just, and then you have Gerby Lambert just kind of hanging out, right? Like it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to say the least on the offensive line. Vamos Irish. I considered asking when the last time you cheered on an ex or a company you left, a la Brian Kelly, but that's petty. Instead, let's talk special teams. I haven't heard a peep about who has the advantage either way. Notre Dame is be able to use it to make big plays. What does OSU special teams look like? Their kicker, I was looking at this. Their kicker is 11-15. He's missed a couple 30 to 39 yarders. He hasn't made a 50 yarders 0 for 1. And then I think he was 6 for 7 from 40 to 49. So 11-15 on the year, not lights out. I think he's been good recently. Mitch Jeter's obviously been a lot better recently. I don't think there's any red flags at this point for either team, but what are your thoughts here, Jamie?
I would say the one thing that you've seen with Mitch Jeter is that he's had to make clutch kicks in the playoffs.
Ohio State has not.
Ohio State has not. Yeah, there's been zero pressure to make any kicks for this guy. He didn't have to kick a field goal against Texas, which was their closest game. He was 2 for 2 against Oregon, but that game it didn't even matter. And he missed one from 50 plus against Tennessee. I mean, I'd say you'd give the big advantage to Notre Dame because Mitch Jeter's doing it. He's had to make it recently. And this dude is the guy who missed the 2 kicks from inside 40 against Michigan that cost them the game, really.
That's
so
fair take.
Yes. So if it comes down to field goals, I'd say where you wouldn't have said this obviously before the playoff, but now as it's gone on,
yeah,
it is advantage to the game.
Jeter is playoff proven. He did. Those were like those misses were like Jeter against USC.
Yes,
type misses, like almost a formality. Oh yeah, we're gonna get 3 on the board. You didn't get it. It's a good point. And then he hasn't had a big kick since then. You know, anything important since that play. That's.
I mean, I will say in terms of the other stuff, like their punter he's another Aussie guy. He's not great. You know, I would say James Randall's like slightly better than him, but like they're not, you know, neither of these guys are the best punters out there. And then also too, he hasn't been used very much, you know, lately either. So, you know, we don't know about, you know, what that's going to mean. They have obviously Caleb Downs is someone that they used in big spots to return a kick. He had the big punt return touchdown against Indiana. He returned a touchdown against UT Chattanooga when he was at Alabama to the house. And he's obviously just one of those guys that, you know, you can just throw back there. They have so many guys that they could just throw back there and just say like, hey, we return it here. Give us a kick. So it's going to be important for hang time. I would say it's going to be important to make sure that they can cover those kicks.
Make tackles. Great players can make great plays in these games. So hopefully Notre Dame can corral Caleb Downs on that type of situation. Charlie's Army asks, what defense held Will Howard to his worst performance this year? This is something I was also looking at. It was pretty clearly Michigan, right? In terms of grade, Penn State held him down pretty good, right? It wasn't like an awful, terrible performance or anything by Will Howard, but you know, they from a percentage standpoint, like the Nebraska game was tough for them, but like he was, I want to say 81% passing in that game, so that's not like a red flag for Will Howard at all. But what have you seen just in terms of maybe beyond the numbers, Jamie, of just Will Howard kind of struggling in situations that maybe will find himself in against Notre Dame kind of on a more regular basis than you would against another team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's on a heater right now, so it's like, you know, he's looked great and he's throwing confident, and he's just like one of these guys who's just like probably making throws that he wasn't earlier in the year in terms of like, hey, I'm just going to let it rip and fit this ball in here and making those throws. I'll say too, like, whatever, I like Will Howard as a player. Like, I think he's a good player. Like, I just, the Malik Zaires worst guy in 15 years. Like, he's pretty good. Like, he's not, he's not CJ Stroud, but as turn as a guy who's like, he's tough. You know, he's a good runner. He will pretty much make, if you give him the throws, the easy throws, he's going to make them. Like, he's going to make them. And he's like 6'4", 6'5", 240. He's a big dude, right? So there's a lot to like about him. Yeah, Michigan is obviously his worst performance of the year. And I would say to Texas, it wasn't like he didn't play bad against Texas at all. Like, it's not that, but that wasn't one of his, you know, it was not close to Oregon and Tennessee. And the big part was taking away Jeremiah Smith. And obviously they're probably playing, there's probably a decent amount of stuff too, where Jeremiah Smith is the top option. So if you kind of make him go away from that, just like how like McCord last year, where I was like, hey, we're doubling or we're going to bracket Harrison here. Like, you can't throw it his way. Well, if that's the first read, like 99% of college quarterbacks, get them off the first read, and it's like, okay, you get stuck on it. You maybe throw it when you shouldn't. You make the wrong throw or the wrong read after, or maybe the pressure gets there. So it's all that. And I would say, like, Texas, I think, did a pretty good job against him. I thought he played well in that game, but it was like
there were moments.
There were moments. And really what it is going to kind of come down to as well is, like, in those moments, can you get him? Can you pick the ball? Can you, like, take advantage of those moments? And that's going to be huge.
Yeah. You want to have the moments. Moments are important, right? Your media company. No one captures the moments like Vahid Salrazade and VSR Media. You know, they'll get you your highlight reel, those moments, those special moments, family portraits, family photos, long video storytelling, things of that nature. They'll capture those moments, Jamie. No one gets the moments better than VSR Media does. Founded by Notre Dame Football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Salrazade, VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. All right, next question from Matt Freeman. Love that the Steelers kept Mike Tomlin. Thoughts from you on that, Jamie?
Oh, man, I've been waiting to talk about this. So, and I know Matt is doing this to troll, but, you know, considering his team didn't even make the playoffs with Joe friggin' Burrow as his quarterback, you know, hey, you're still a Bengals fan, Matt, so just relax, okay? Easily, so my wife is a Steelers fan too, so we're like we're very invested in the Steelers, and you know, longtime Steelers fan. She's not one of these people who like, hey, you like the Steelers, so I'm going to be one of those wives who jumps up. No, she was a longtime Steelers fan. So been there through the whole Tomlin era. It's got to change, and not necessarily that I wasn't one of those people that are like, he needs to be fired like 3 years ago. And I've always been a defender of him because I think he is a good coach.
Yeah.
But there are things there. I think he's got blind spots he's loyal to certain coaches on his staff that it's like, you got to make changes like earlier and identify. He has been horrible with his offensive coordinator hires. And I don't think Arthur Smith is certainly better than a lot of the other guys they've had. But like, I don't think he is the best guy for where the things are taken. Like, I would have loved if they just, you know, they found like a Todd Monken or something like that. And they were able to get one of those types there. But let's just be honest. Like, they don't have an quarterback. Their quarterbacks stink. Russ had like, you know, a nice little 5-game heater. And then he was back to being Russ again, where I've never seen a guy who was like a great athlete just become like running in quicksand faster than him in terms of his like drop down, especially because this guy's like, you know, sleeping in a cryo chamber and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't seem to help. It has not helped his athleticism. He's not an athlete anymore. And then he holds on to the ball forever. And and now because he's short, it was like the one thing about Breeze was he was a short guy who could process things fast and make quick decisions, whatever. And that's just not Russ. he can't have it. So they need talent. Also, too, the receivers. In what world are they gonna be successful in the NFL when George Pickens is your best receiver? Talented, super flake, just beyond flake. In the long line of flakes that they've had, basically, from Antonio Brown on, you got to find better players as receiver. So, I mean, I put a lot of it on not just, I mean, Kevin Colbert before him, but Omar Khan definitely now too. It's like, how could you not see that it's a priority to improve the talent at receiver? And I would say too, like, the one thing you could really blame Tomlin for is that they do not, he's supposed to be a defensive guy, and they have played good defense for the most of the time. But really only in like the last like 5 years when they played good defense was when Brian Flores was on staff and he fixed some things for them. I honestly think they got to change both coordinators. You got to get better talent at the skill positions. It absolutely has to change there. And you have to get a freaking quarterback. Like, it's so funny because Darnold is just getting obviously destroyed because of his last 2 games. Sam Darnold would take him in a heartbeat over what they have. Like, and he probably wouldn't do well with the Steelers system because they got no guys to throw to.
Right. That's such a good plan in Minnesota,
Yeah.
And it's like they had those wideouts too. And like, I think the dome helped also.
Yeah. So I don't know. They are very much stuck in that kind of murky middle. And I don't know how they really get out of it to the point where, if you get rid of Tomlin, you're going to get a worse coach. It's going to happen. So for everyone who's wanting that, you're not hiring someone better than him. But there's so many. He talked about how there needs to be major changes within, the organization. And it's like it better happen, because if they don't, it's just going to be the same thing again, where they're like, 10-7, get a wild card game on the road, and then just get destroyed.
I mean, maybe you fire him and hire Monken.
But I mean, maybe, but I just also too, it is one of those things where you never know, where it's like, if you just said like Ben Johnson, who is like the top guy, everyone's like, this guy's done a great job. It's like, it's not attractive to those guys because of what you have there is the material, So you got to do something with the material, and you have to rearrange how you have built the roster.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's frustrating.
Listen,
longtime Ravens,
as a lifelong Notre Dame Ravens fan since 2022. I don't know what these problems are like. I don't know. It's very difficult. All I know is that they moved Kyle Hamilton to deep safety, and that changed their whole life. And so that's what happens when you've got the best player in the world. You got the best safety in the world. Hopefully it all continues against Buffalo. Drew Brennan says PSU's running backs had a good day against Notre Dame. What gives you confidence they can do a better job against Ohio State's 2 running backs and their more mobile quarterback?
Well, it's a different offense, and then also too, like we've kind of said about, and a different offensive line and a different scheme
and more days,
and also too, if you get got some way, like we always say, Al Golden is like, okay, we got this way. Well, we're not letting that happen again.
Yeah.
Right. So, basically that, I think is why I kind of just to put it succinctly, but it's one of those things where I think they could stuff those backs for like a good amount of the game, but then all it takes is like that one Henderson play to just whatever, and that's the danger, right?
Like they got last year. Yep.
Yeah.
The Irish Legion asks, Should Notre Dame be more aggressive passing median deep in this game to test Ohio State secondary? Does Notre Dame have any successful zone beater plays that have hit big? How does Notre Dame attack their zone scheme? Yeah, they do. I mean, they hit the play. They hit what's a Louisville on zone play. That was a big play there. Denbrock's got a whole bunch of stuff. It's just a question. It's similar to the other side of the ball where it's like you just got to have the right play at the right time. And Denbrock's had that, right? He had it against Louisville. He had it against Indiana on the post route, right, where he was able to get that play going. I mean, there's countless examples of having the right play at the right time there. And it just like that's what it has to be. Like the coordinators have to have great games in this one to get over on, because like look, Ohio State has the number one defense, right, in the country. Like you're not going to consistently just hit them medium deep, right? Like you've got to pile up something at the right time against the right defense with the right player, and you got to make the play. And that's how these games get won, right? Especially when you're the lesser talented team, and that's just what they have to do. So, good thought.
Yeah, and I would say like I don't think you're going to see a ton of medium passes in this game. One, because their safeties are so good, and they're going to eat up a lot of that stuff. And also, you don't want to get into too many situations where you're putting the ball in danger in those things against those guys. So there's that. The other thing is that I do think they're going to take some deep shots. Not a ton, because then we know how Notre Dame is, and they're not going to be able to protect for long enough and all this kind of stuff too. But Davis Igbinosun, like he is boomer bust. He's boomer bust, and there's a whole lot of busts. 17 penalties against him is insane. It's not even close. Like I looked at the Power 4 things. It's like the next guy is 8. So that's a problem. And honestly, too, like I was, because I'm looking at all the stuff. I'm looking at my notes from last year, and and we got the big PI call. There was a big PI call against him in the game, which happened, and it was like I believe it was against Flores when it happened, right?
Yeah.
Finally got it.
No, it was Tobias.
It was Tobias Merriman.
They did a stop and go.
Okay, because this is what it was. There were 2 other times where they tried to go to Flores, and they were blatant PIs.
Yeah,
that they did not call. So, which you can count that he's going to have a PI on like just about every play. That's what he does. Which is why I don't think this guy's going to have a long career in the NFL, because he's just going to be a guy who's going to, if you have this thing, he's going to get picked on all the time. And obviously the level of receivers get better and better, right? But like that is a guy you have to go after. If I'm in a big spot, and if you think that you're going to get a look where, hey, he's singled up and there's not going to be a safety help over the top, so there's not a chance of like a pick or whatever kind of thing, you go at him every time. Because, he's going to win some of those times, and he's going to be physical, he's whatever. But this SEC crew that's calling the game, apparently the most flag happy crew in the SEC. So you got to hope that you're getting those calls, because as much as like, there might be some calls against Christian Gray and people are like, oh man, Christian Gray got these flags. I mean, check the numbers between him and the number of flags against the biggest. It's a completely different story. Like it would not be surprising if at the end of this game you said Notre Dame won the game. Well, what were the X factors in the game? Igbinosun, 4 PI flags. Like, could happen. It's on the table.
Yeah. He's 29 penalties in 3 years. It's
a lot.
It's amazing. It's truly amazing.
It would be, and it's not like, it's different because it's not like Vontez Perfect, like being like, oh, I had these super dirty plays.
Yeah.
It's just like, this guy just can't help himself. He's just grabbing and just whatever. Like, and the thing is too, is once you have the rep, it's over for you, because they just know they're going to always look for it.
Fighting Hanley's asked, has OSU faced an opponent since Michigan that was capable of replicating their game plan with success? What offensive adjustments did OSU fail to make in the second half of that game?
Well, one of the things that was different is that they ran, they were mostly an inside zone team at that point with the same offensive line. And it was just like, you're not running inside zone against Michigan. Like, their defensive tackles ate them up, and it was just like, forget it, right? So also too, they like got a ton of pressure on Howard in that game, and that obviously, made a difference. And they did a lot of stuff where they played more zone than they normally do. Like, Michigan is a pretty heavy man team too, and like Wink Martindale is obviously like a big blitz guy.
Yeah.
But he is. They didn't blitz as much in that game, because they wanted to make sure that they were, kind of protected against Jeremiah Smith, and they had a pretty good plan against them. They ran like a lot of like, too high stuff. They ran like cover 6 against them, like, and they would, like we kind of talked about it, like, you run one thing one side and another thing other, and they confuse them, and that was definitely a big factor in the game. And then the other thing was that they like won the little things. They 50% pressure in that game.
Yeah,
on Howard, like that makes
that'll get it done. Yeah, if Notre Dame does that, I like their chances in this game a lot more than, let's say, if it was like 20%. That. That's a real problem when you don't have time. I mean, it just is, right? They beat them up front. Smooth Diver says, was it a mistake not to get Mukum and or Saviano at least a few snaps in the last 2 games?
No, because I mean, if those guys were ready, they would have played. To throw those guys in, and I mean, I see this, first of all, the next person who throws on a thing to say, hey, how about this offensive lineman playing defensive tackle? I don't know. I might have to put a PSA on ISD's board to be like, never things to never mention again. This guy doing this, because you just can't, or just any kind of like, hey, position switch. Like, you just got to know that to do that within like a week of something, to say, hey, let's get someone to do this thing that they haven't done before, you're just asking someone to fail. Like, because it's just, the techniques are different. It's not like you're just doing this. Also, your knowledge of what the calls are and all that kind of stuff. You can't just say, hey, stick in that gap and just hold that gap. Like, you're not used to holding up against a double team. You're the guy used to double team. It's different. But anyways, with this thing with Mukum and Saviano, I think it's 100%. If those guys had shown enough to get into a position to play, kind of like how, like, I would say with like Carson Hobbs, if Carson Hobbs had gotten to a position where like, oh, he's good enough to, help right now, well, they would have played him more, and they would have given like Gray and Moore a little bit rest. But they obviously don't feel confident enough, whether it's technique, whether it's knowledge of the defense, whether it's all this kind of stuff, because all it takes is one play that can cost you a game in these kind of situations. And it's not to say that a tired guy can't get beat and whatever, and hey, maybe that'll cost you. But if the tired guy knows what he's doing and the other guy doesn't know what he's doing, and or screws up on a check, or is just, someone who's like 70% of the time his technique is good, the other 30% it's not, that 30% could kill you. That could just absolutely lose you a game, because that's how it becomes like a big, huge play that could be backbreaking there. So everybody kind of wants those kind of things, and put these guys in and do it. But like, they are stretched to where they can go. That's just kind of what it is right now, and that's just the reality of it.
It's championship rounds. You had 15 games. Like, if they're not ready, they're not ready. You can't, it's not even about those guys. It's just like your teammates, like the rest of the team.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be able to count on everyone doing the right thing at the right time. And if they're not ready, they're not ready, you know, and that's not like anyone's fault. It's not their fault. Right. It's not a indictment on anything about them. It's just like, if you're not ready to play in this type of environment at this type of competition level, then you're just not. And so, you know, look, at Notre Dame they have one game. They have one game left. They need to get a performance out of the guys that have been playing all year, and they need to get it out of them. And so, you know, you play the guys that are ready to go. Is Will Howard a dog or a puppy? This is from T-Borg3. We're about to find out. The interesting, so 40% of completions to receivers considered wide open. Should Notre Dame be able to mitigate that with their man defense? Can he make big time throws, you know, in the tight windows and things of that nature? OSU wasn't good on third down against Texas or really all year. How does Notre Dame make OSU one dimensional where they're most likely to end up in third and long often? I mean, I think we've kind of touched on both of these things in this game. Yeah, like when we talked about like forcing them to play in a way that they don't want to, right? That's what every single game is, right? And that's where it's like you got to make OSU become a straight drop back team on key downs, basically. And that's bringing in your greatest strength, and that's kind of their biggest vulnerability, right? To the extent that they have one. You know, obviously they're not bad, right? It's just that you got to emphasize your strengths and emphasize their weaknesses at the same time. Anything else on that, Jamie?
No, I think that kind of sums it up really. Like, you know, you want to be who you are, but you also have to adapt to your opponent. And that's just, you know, it's mirroring that, you know, for each game. And then also understanding that, you know, maybe you try to be who you are and you have to morph in the middle of the game, or maybe you just thought, hey, this is you try to be something else. And you're like, well, we're going back to what worked for us, 'cause this isn't working, you know, like, so there's all of this kind of stuff that happens. But, you know, I will say just the thing with those guys being wide open. I mean, a lot of that is just talent, you know. They got guys who could just run by guys. Like, that's part of it. And the other part is, you know, Chip Kelly is, when Chip Kelly is like on, he can scheme it up as good as anybody. And he schemes stuff up. I guarantee he'll have some runs and some plays in this game that they have not used all year. That will happen.
Yep. And Notre Dame will probably do the same, by the way. All right, we've got so late incoming questions that I didn't get on the thing, but I'll read them here. Keenan Knight, after Notre Dame wins the Natty and OSU fires Day, would Freeman jump to Ohio State or the NFL? Or do you believe Notre Dame is Freeman's dream job? He seems to get and love ND a lot. I think if Notre Dame wins the national championship and Ryan Day is fired, I think he would go to Ohio State. I don't think he'd go to the NFL.
I just have a feeling he won't go anywhere after. I mean, if he wins a national championship, there's no way he's going after, because it's like literally he's at a point where if he goes, I mean, you know how it is. If he wins at Notre Dame, they're going to build him a statue.
They will build him a statue. Yes, they will build him a statue. They will build him a statue maybe before the next season starts.
And if he leaves right after, he's not getting that statue. You know, so he'll have so much goodwill for so long that it's just like, I don't think they go. And then also too, they're not firing Ryan Day. They're not firing.
Yeah, they're not going to.
That's not happening.
That's why I don't think they would. I don't think
that's not happening now that they've done this. Because even if Ohio State loses this game, yeah, they're a favorite and all that kind of stuff, but the story will be, man, Notre Dame, like, this was the team of destiny and look at all this stuff they overcome, rather than, oh, Ohio State choked, because look what they did to overcome all their stuff to get here. So it's I don't think certainly there will be people who are unhappy with him and Ohio State fans because they, expect a championship, but like he's not getting fired over it. I mean, he wasn't going to get fired even if I don't think he was getting fired if they lost to Tennessee. He just would have been on the hot seat the next year or whatever, and he's definitely not going to be on the hot seat next year no matter what.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know that, like, it's weird to think like Marcus Freeman would say no to Ohio State. It's weird to think that.
I just think at this moment, I think if there could be another thing, it's kind of like a little bit like the Roy Williams, Kansas, North Carolina thing, where it's like he said no to him a bunch before he eventually said yes.
Yeah.
So maybe that happens later on. And I should probably ask Mike Frank. He's a big Kansas basketball fan, but like how he kind of feels about Roy Williams and after he left and all that. But like, I don't think if Marcus Freeman coaches at Notre Dame for 10 years, and let's say he wins one national championship and then they're in the playoff and they're in the mix a whole bunch of other times. I mean, whatever, fans are fans and they'll react a certain way, but I can't see too many people being upset with them if they're like, hey, 10 years later, he decided to go to.
If Notre Dame wins a national title this year, you can do whatever you want, man. I do not care. Do whatever you want. I do care, but like I'm not gonna hate on anything. Let's win the title first and see how I feel about it. Mess around and find out on something like that. BPD 306 asking about the officiating. Is Notre Dame getting screwed and or officiating bias? The only person I think I as we have mentioned a number of times on this show throughout the year, don't aspire conspiracy when you could just jot it down to incompetence. I think that's pretty much where it is. The only person I feel like I want to start looking into social media accounts is that back judge, man. Some of those calls are just like, oh, come on, brother. Like I need to look into like what's hanging up in your room.
That was the only person this year that I thought like, oh, this guy really has it out for Notre Dame. He does not. But as I kind of mentioned too, I think there's a lot of these guys who hate Ohio State just as much. And definitely the other thing is like, I mean, every fan base has obnoxious fans. Ohio State fans tend to get after people. And I think that
do they?
They don't have the best rep.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. Yeah. So I think that will I mean Kirk Herbstreit literally had to move out of Columbus, Ohio because of it, but so
there's a little bit, maybe our own Matt Freeman has some evidence. What I will say is like on a conspiracy standpoint, what would the SEC rather? The Big Ten won a national title or Notre Dame, independent Notre Dame? SEC would rather the independent Notre Dame won a national title, I think. Yeah. So there's that. All right, last question from Notre Dame 2025. How are you guys going to celebrate the win? I mean, beyond our post-game show. And I'll tell you right now, if Notre Dame wins, you can leave the show whenever you want. It will be a very long. I may not turn it off, honestly. I may not go to bed. And I told my wife that too. It might be a 5-hour stream. If there's one person watching, I will talk to them.
Yeah, well, that might. I mean, I won't stay on that long because I'll have.
You have work to do.
I also and then I also have my wife will be away on that day, so I will have my brother-in-law's going to be babysitting, so I don't want to leave him forever because hopefully my son goes to sleep that day.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't even want to talk about it because let's just let it happen. And if it happens, then great, and I'll enjoy it.
I think I've told this. Maybe I've told this story before. There's a place I used to in Long Beach, Chen's on Cherry and Broadway. They have they give you this. You can order an orange chicken kind of plate, and it's like in this one of these big, these Chinese food places. Like the to-go bin is just like it's overflowing. It's enormous. And when I was younger, in my mid-20s, I used to go there with my friends, and if you ate the whole thing, it's like 5,000 calories. It's like so bad for you. It's so and so I stopped going there because it was like I couldn't really justify it as I'm getting older. But I always talk about it, and I was like, you know what? If Notre Dame wins the national championship, I'm going to Chen's, and I'm going to get orange chicken, and it's like on a bed of fried wontons too. It's so awful, but it's so delicious at the same time. So if they win the national title, I'm getting Chen's orange chicken as a celebration. I'm gonna eat the whole thing, and I'll probably be sick for the next few days after that, but it'll all be worth it. So,
love that. That's not the sick part, but everything.
Yeah. So I actually do have a thing that I'm gonna do if Notre Dame wins. So, all right, that's gonna do it. Those are all the questions today. Thank you everyone for tuning in for a long one. The mailbags are always longer. We'll be back tomorrow. Doing our normal Hit and Hustle Thursday show, talking more Notre Dame, Ohio State, and any news and notes that come up in between from there. So we'll be back tomorrow at our normal time, 12 Eastern time. Thank you, everyone. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, so whatever it is. We are going live. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Keep hitting and hustling.